Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fire Up Michigan. My name is Scott Morgan, Rough Motor City, Manmouth, back in Florida. My goodness, folks. When I say back in Florida, I mean exactly that. Over the last 12 days or so, I've traveled 42 hours, 3,159 miles in about 12 days. And then, of course, you add 2 hours of sightseeing. So, to tell you that we ended up getting a workout is mildly stating the obvious. And if that isn't good enough, we ended up doing a total of 15 presentations. We did 12 shows, and we did two in the hotel room. And I got to tell you, the red carpet in suites in Cooperstown was fantastic. And of course, we did a great show with Mark Mancini and Bruce Kessinger on Saturday with Bill North. What a wonderful show that was to talk to Bill North. So I'm glad we were able to do that. And we have a lot more coming down the pipeline as well. So meanwhile, I'm back in familiar territory. Kind of like to sleep in my own bed, but boy, I had a blast on the road. And I also want to point out another show that'll be in the works for No Limits. Well, and I want to mention this ahead of time. So it's something to look forward. We haven't finalized a date, but I interviewed a New York City tour guide out there who told me to watch out for the scams and saved me from a lot of headaches when I was in New York City and Manhattan on Friday night. So I'll keep you guys posted on that as well. So you want to talk about the most ethical tour guide on the planet, the guy that I'm going to be doing the show with. There'll be one that you can look forward to. So meanwhile, introduce my crew here. But before I go ahead and do that, I want to point out to you folks that you can subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel on our YouTube channel, where you go to youtube.com and then look for South Florida Tribune and then subscribe from there, or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Want to get that early promo in. And now I have my dream team. As always, these two guys are the BESD. Capitalize it. Okay, 48 point, whatever. You get the drill. And first of all, we'll go ahead and lead to Mr. Detroit, George Eichhorn.
Hey, Scott and Madman, it's good to be back on. Wonderful. Motor City magic coming here from Detroit.
And Mark Mancini.
Always a pleasure with you two guys. Madman on Mondays with the Motor City boys. Can't get better than that.
Yeah, well, you got a lot, but we certainly enjoy having you on, Mark. You've certainly become a member of the Detroit media market. We're really thrilled to have you on board. I'm going to do something a little different, though, with George Eichhorn tonight. I'd rather do it early instead of later. George, why don't you, I know you wrote a book. Why don't you talk about it early, and then we're going to get to the subject at hand.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, my book is called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air, featuring the likes of Ernie Harwell and George Kell and Bud Lynch and Bruce Martin and George Blaha, and of course the great Van Patrick and Frank Beckman and all these sportscasters, and our very own Scott Morganroth is featured in the book too. And this book is available. It's a great, easy read, $19 or something like that. We have a link to the on the South Florida Tribune website for a link to order the book, or you could go to arcadiapress.com. But yeah, get yourself a copy of that book. Learn about Detroit sports broadcasting history. It's a rich history, and we're all proud of it, right, Scott? Especially our dear friend, Ernie Harwell.
Right, and I'll tell you what, it's neat to had a page in me with Jimmy Connors and Muhammad Ali as well. So you picked two of the best pictures out there. So glad. So I just want to get that in right away.
Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
So we'll talk about the business in hand here, and that being Detroit Tigers former GM Al Avila was fired. AJ Hinch, I believe, should have a lot of say in this search for replacement. So I'm going to turn over to you, George.
Well, yeah, it's something that we predicted, Madman and Scott, and you guys were talking about it with me, and we were talking about it with some of our guests in previous shows, such as Tommy Morris. But the leash was pretty short. I mean, what happened basically was it was a complete turn on Avila by the media and the fans. I guess you got to lump those two together here in Detroit. There was no room for error. And obviously the Tigers continue to stumble and bumble, playing terrible baseball, lost 8 in a row, 9 in a row. But anyways, it's a situation where the team needed to make a change. Al was the fall guy. Al had to be the fall guy. You're not going to get rid of Hinch, obviously, and the owner is not going to do anything to himself, obviously. So the decision was made to fire Al Avila, despite the fact that he had been running the organization for the last 6-7 years, been part of the organization for, oh gosh, I don't know, what was it?
Over 20 years. He's been a part of
22 years,
right
in some capacity. Al, good number 2 man, but I don't think he was obviously was not a good number 1 man, and that being the number 1 man, meaning the general manager.
Well, the Tigers were quite patient with him, and the bottom line is when the fans and the media turn on you, and then you end up having low attendance figures, that's all going to add up. I mean, you went out there and said proclaimed that the rebuild was over. In retrospect, you took a major step back. Well, also that AJ Hinch did a good job getting them 76 up, 86 down, 10-year games under 500, which is a good record by their standards. And you thought, all right, now the owner's going to spend a little bit of money out there for free agents, and Mr. Avila here picked the wrong ones. I mean, the pitcher Rodriguez, is it Eduardo Rodriguez? I think the Boston Red Sox were shrewd. They didn't want him back, and the Tigers ended up paying him a lot of money, and that hasn't worked out well. And I'm not going to pick on a lot of the other ones. I know Javier Baez is underachieved, but we won't get into all that. But when you talk about the sum of the whole, the only thing I'll add to it before I turn it over to Madman is I'm glad that AJ Hinch is going to go out there and have a say in who this guy is. And don't be surprised if Chris Ilitch does lean on AJ Hinch a lot, because AJ Hinch is very well connected in the community of baseball. And you know how many connections? And by the way, let's not forget that AJ Hinch did go ahead and win a world championship with the Houston Astros. Say what you want about the cheating, the bang of the drums or whatever. But he'll know the type of guy that he wants in there, because the key is the manager and the general manager have to be able to work together. And I think, I'm sure they're going to cast a wide net about who they're going to bring in. But I do believe that AJ Hinch should have a large say in the next general manager. With that said, Madman Mancini, I don't know whether you want to comment as much about the firing or a little, and then maybe suggest some candidates before we go on to the other business.
Well, it's hard to find, the trader Jack McKeons and the Hal Smiths these days. I mean, now we're giving away our ages, but, if you want to have somebody come in there and turn around the program, and I don't know if he'd come into that organization and try to turn it around, because it would take time to turn it around, but he turned 2 of them around and resurrected both those cities in Boston and Chicago. Would be my good friend Theo Epstein, who's working with Major League Baseball. That would be a guy that would stockpile some talent in the minor league system there in Detroit and get them reputable. Another guy that would, probably do some wonders, in that organization, if you can pry him away from the Washington Nationals, would be Mike Rizzo. Some of these guys would be the guys that would turn this stockpile of talent. You've seen what they've done in their cities. Rizzo got a haul for Juan Soto. So I think that's where you need to go. And I like AJ Hinch, but when he left Houston now, what have you done for me lately? So hopefully he can have a say in this and do something with this organization, because the Astros haven't really missed a beat without him.
All right. Well, I have some comments in the chat room, so I feel an obligation to make sure we point out. Ron Kroll says, hate to see or insinuate this, but why would any player want to come to Detroit now except for very major money? Good point, Ron. Okay, if Ivan Rodriguez was a guy that you had to pay a lot to do, but he says today's players decide where they want to go and what team. Why would they want to come to Detroit? And then he mentions L.A., Boston, New York, Colorado, etc. Ron, thank you very much for being a part of the show and some of the suggestions. So I'll let you guys go ahead and piggyback off them if you want to.
Well, it's a valid point. Obviously, Detroit, with the exception of the Pistons, obviously they're able to get some talent. The other teams have struggled in that area, the Red Wings lately and the Lions, but we're not talking about that right now. We're concentrating on baseball, and you hit it right on the head, Scott, before. Yeah, I mean, Baez, the guy's got 20 errors. Come on, 20 errors on August 15th. And now, don't get me wrong, he can make the spectacular play, but he should not have 20 errors right now and be batting 240. So he's been a disappointment. And you mentioned already about Rodriguez, and then the catcher, he's done nothing, bat 200. But I mean, he can call a good game, but the Tigers have been hurt by a lot of things. The injuries have been devastating this year across the board, the Tiger injuries, and then the lack of production from guys that are big league players like Jonathan Scope and Robbie Grossman.
Right.
And these guys, Hossie, and, Hossie's not that old, but, our boy is going down the tubes right now, Mr. Hall of Famer Cabrera. He's lucky to get a single, and his back is, his legs and everything he can't play but one game every 3 days. So a lot of things have gone wrong in Detroit, but I agree with my man, Madman, Theo Epstein. It's got to be at the top of the list right now. He's not a kid anymore, but he was the brains behind, like you mentioned, 2 World Series champions. And, there are others. Look at the guys that have developed in Tampa and Oakland. These teams have small market towns that continually, until this year, at least in Oakland, but they've been putting out winners, with great farm systems. So, you might want to tap in a general manager from those teams or an assistant GM. I'm not sure, but I'd rather go with the proven guy, such as Epstein. And the Tigers went, remember, with Dombrowski, the proven guy before, when they brought Dave Dombrowski in. And, of course, they let him spend. But, yeah, I'd rather go with somebody with a little bit of proven talent. But I'm Scott, you're on target there. I'm glad that they're going to get Hinch's opinion on it. That's important.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to this, and I have some really good Hall of Fame stuff I'm going to bring out here, is Carlos Correa, played for AJ Hinch. And that's where I think Al Avila messed up. He said, you know what?
Yes.
If you had sat down and brought Correa to the table with AJ Hinch as your recruiter, you may have him instead of Javier Baez. I think that's a big mistake that you didn't at least get him in the building and see if you could work out a deal. With that said, okay, that's what I have to think about Avila. Time will tell if he ever lands a job anywhere else. Although you never know, he could end up in Miami in some sort of a role because he's from the southern Florida area, obviously the Davie area, and his son, they grew up in the South Florida. But we'll see. I don't know. I think it is what it is. All right, so now, folks, now that we talked about the Detroit Tigers, I just alluded to at the top of the show, came back from a long trip. So I'm only going to go over 3 videos that are currently on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Folks, if you haven't subscribed to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel, please do it. I've got so much stuff coming down the pipeline from Cooperstown. We have a lot of great past videos. I'm sure that everybody would hopefully get something out of it. So the first video I want to talk about right now, our Cooperstown 1 video, comes from a Canadian youngster that actually came with his dad. Now, he took a picture of my wife, Candy, and I outside of there. And then I asked him if he wanted to come on the show right as we were about to go on in the Hall of Fame. And you know what? His dad said, yeah, I have no problem with you going on it at all. In fact, his dad was kind of intrigued by it. In fact, I even asked this kid. So to make a long story short, which intrigues me about this particular video is it's a father-son, generation-to-generation thing. And that's the one thing about baseball to me it separates it from a lot. Okay, how many times have you had players falling in the footsteps of their dad? I can get into a whole thing about all the different ones that have gone out there, and I don't want to get off track. Otherwise, who knows how long this thing will go. But I love the idea of a Canadian fan coming to Cooperstown. And ironically, he was actually wearing a Miami Marlins shirt,
Wow.
like the jersey, and this kid knows his baseball. I actually, as I got to know this kid, he was talking about Pete Rose, and I were talking about him. Will he ever get in the Hall of Fame? I think Rose gets in when he's dead. Okay, they're not going to give him the satisfaction. And he talked about Sirius. Those just a couple of things that we talked about. I'm not giving them all away, but it was such an intriguing way to begin my day at the Hall of Fame, bringing this youngster on. And you got to watch the video to be inspired about the generational thing. But, I don't care whether you're 8 years old or 58 years old. It doesn't matter. If you have a good opinion, something to say, you're welcome to come on my show all day long. And the youngster and his dad, of course, subscribed to the channel, but they were happy to do it because, I pulled this guy out of nowhere and he offered to take a picture. So, yeah, why not? But then I'm thinking, why not have a father and son? And I think the response has been pretty good. So I wanted to bring that out to your guys' attention. So, George, what are your thoughts about the idea of the Canadian fan being on our broadcast network?
I think it's a great idea. the long-suffering fans, some of them in Toronto and Montreal, of course, when the Expos were there. Blue Jay fans are very loyal. They've had some great crowds, as you guys know, over the years at the Sky Dome, the Rogers Center, and no, I mean there's a lot of good baseball history there. I mean, Sparky Anderson goes back to playing in Canada when he was trying to get into the big leagues, and I tell you what, there's a lot of good fans north of the border, and I'm glad you met this young man, because it sounds like you said, Scott, he really knows his stuff, and he loves the game, and obviously his father gave the green light to do the interview.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good point, George. You know what? He was a nice kid. He really was. And he was knowledgeable, and his dad didn't mind doing it. I mean, come on. How do you not want to bring a kid on that doesn't want to talk baseball, knowing that he's there? I talked to him 15 minutes before we went on. You're okay with it? Oh, I'm cool. I mean, this kid's here, a little rock star as far as I'm concerned, the way he acted. But I just thought it was a great opportunity before we went into the Hall of Fame. How can the heck can you preview going into the museum and not snap this kid out of nowhere? And just because you want to take a picture, say, I'll give you more than you bargained for. And we had a great time. My goodness. And he's a subscriber. Hopefully he'll have an opportunity to see what we're doing here in Fire Up Michigan. But, opportunities can come anywhere. You can find your next big interview anywhere you want, as long as you're resourceful or industrious, as Tom Gage once told me to my face. And as long as it's quality and people understand it, you bring it to life. And I was proud to have this kid on. I'll tell you, I don't need a do-over. If this kid ever responds back to me and ever wants to come on the show, I'll let him back on. But, it's an open invitation. I believe his name was Steven, and his dad. They were just great people. Folks, you just got to see the video. Mark, any quick observations about this video?
Well, I'm surprised you didn't delay your visit into that Cooperstown, talking Dave Steve, Tony Fernandez, Kelly Gruber, George Bell.
Right.
I mean, he could have kept you busy right there, and you would have probably came back with some tigers, and you would have had a Tiger J thing going right outside Cooperstown.
Yeah, but the whole idea, Mark, was just seeing a youngster enthusiastic about being on the air for the first time ever, and being able to talk baseball, just to give enough there, and why he was at the museum, and how his dad and what they were going to get out of their trip. And I'll tell you, once you listen to that interview, you'll understand that, to me, Mark, okay, it isn't about just talking about a home team versus the other. Anybody can do that all day long. But when you take a kid who's coming in from wherever, and he has a knowledgeable presence in the game, and to me, it's just unreal. And this to me, and I'll get into more videos as you folks continue to tune in. I'm only going over 3 and then previewing 2 more. This was a great way to start what turned out to be an unbelievable experience out on the road. So with that said, okay, we're going to talk about our next opportunity, which turned out to be a networking experience with Mark Maraday. There we go. George Eichhorn took a quick water break. No big deal. But anyway, networking with Mark Maraday. Here's a guy that I ended up meeting over on Twitter is what I did. And Mark and I were in touch. He does help promote South Florida Tribune is what he does. And by retweeting a lot of our content, and we talked on the phone, and when the opportunity came that he would be in Cooperstown the same time that we were on it, then it was a natural to meet him. So what I ended up doing is outside my hotel, the red carpet inn, I can't say it enough, these people treated us phenomenal. We were in town with his wife, and his sons were playing in a youth baseball. We found 30 minutes to talk about it, and this guy was unbelievable, and what we did is we titled it for the Sports Exchange, the Pittsburgh Sports Scene. Well, Mark, you know what? Well, actually, no, I'm thinking ahead of myself. This is somebody else. It doesn't make any difference, but we'll get to that in a moment. So, but anyways, Mark, what are your thoughts about the networking significance that you can go out there and have when you're on the road?
Well, I think it's very important. I always like to look at, I think God gives us abilities, and, either you use them or you lose them. We all have them, I know, and I think the same way you do. He gives us a personality and networking skills, and bring that to the forefront, because it's very important today, especially with technology today. I mean,
right.
Years ago, we would talk about you have to buy airtime somewhere and everything. Now all you need is an iPhone and everything. You can have your own studio. So
That's
put a
true.
backdrop of whatever city you're in, and you're all set.
Yeah, this situation was so good too, I'm because I got so enthusiastic about the Pittsburgh thing because you're from that area. But I'll get to it in a moment. But in Meredith's case, we've had a good relationship going through Twitter, and we've stayed in touch. When the opportunity to do a face-to-face show, this was a natural if I ever saw one. And he's just a super nice guy, and he's a coach and a teacher and a guy that's a good role model to younger kids. And folks, again, you got to go out there and see that show. It's called Networking with. What we had with Mark Meredith, and we did this actually outside our hotel. So, you know what? I mentioned in the video at that particular time that we come into your city because they never know where I'm going to find my next co-host and my next performer. And Mark Meredith to me is a classic example of that. You can find him anywhere. I've had a lot of great. I've had a lot of great opportunities, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, or wherever, I mean, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn are the three where I land a lot of guests as well. And of course, now I work with local chamber of commerces. So you never know where those guests. So with that said, George, basically give me a quick comment about the networking significance that I had with Mark Meredith.
No, that's great. That's great. And the fact that you met him at a great place, the Hall of Fame is remarkable. And Scott, you've always been good at networking. I've always admired your skills. So I've known you such a long time, and I know that you're very, very good at that. You're very thorough, and it's very important, to meet people, and not to just meet people, but to meet people and find common interests, and find a common thread. And in sports, there's always a common thread, but it goes beyond sports because. I mean, you're embarking on a lot of different areas of commerce, chamber of commerce, and things that you're involved in as well. But the network thing, is so important. It's so crucial. Like you said, man, I mean, it's a different world out there now than what we grew up in. And it's so important to network with people and to just, relate to each other in such a manner.
Well, I think the significance about Mark Meredith is he went to the Baseball Hall of Fame with his son, and he had a chance of playing a baseball tournament. So I'll just connect the dots here. The Baseball Hall of Fame enabled me to meet Mark Meredith in person. We were talking about doing it. We were able to do it in person. And youth, to me, baseball games just finished and made it so much easier. So connect the dots, folks. Okay, Twitter plus baseball youth plus networking, and what do you have? You have yourself a good show here. Where again, I don't care whether your next guest is going to come. You're right. What I've learned to do is whether I have content coming from sports or not, it doesn't matter. Our network is really not designed to be a one-trick pony. But I think about it with Mark. Okay, we do a broadcast outside my hotel, and thanks to Twitter and Youth Baseball and the Baseball Hall of Fame, you have a roadmap to what we consider a good broadcast. And what I liked about the networking show is that I want to make sure that folks understand that when you watch that video, you're going to find out how important it is to create the ultimate thing, and that's a win-win situation. And that's what my intent was. Mission accomplished, folks. Go out there and check it out on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Now, let me go to Pittsburgh, okay, with Mr. Pittsburgh and the like, and why I got excited earlier, okay. I'm over at Doubleday Field, okay, and I ended up doing a video in front of it, short video out there. Get inside there. I meet this guy named Dale Eller from the Pittsburgh area. And I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Mark Mancini, you better be listening to this because I'm bringing your name here. And my friend Mark Mancini and colleague will love it, knowing that we're doing a show with a Pittsburgh theme to it. And I'll tell you what, though, and that's why I love to be excited about all these things because your mind rolls 200 miles an hour. So between Meredith and now Dale Eller, I have two shows that are in the 30-minute range, and they were great for the Sports Exchange too. Again, Sports Exchange is our biggest sports show on the network, and I'm going to tell you one thing with this guy here, Dale Eller. He was knowledgeable about the Penguins, the Pirates, and the Steelers, and I'm not going to tell you everything about the whole 30-minute, but it was one of those deals where I ended up seeing him inside the park. We talked about it. We got to know each other. Before long, we found the right spot at Doubleday Field. And what do you have? You have a Sports Exchange with the Pittsburgh sports seating. So, all right, Mr. Pittsburgh, go out there and give me your 2 cents worth on this.
Well, he just brought in the horizons. He was just saying, you got to get to God's country, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Right. Michigan's a great sports town. I've always thought that they were blue
Yeah,
collar.
you
They were a
know,
blue
you
collar
know,
area.
and if I could take a minute just to reflect on it, growing up out here in Los Angeles and looking at it from afar, the Penguins came into existence in 1967.
Right.
They couldn't draw anything. I mean, you could just walk down and see the games for like $5, and then you had Michel Dion walk off the ice. Granted, we had John Pronovo and Sil Apps and Pierre LaRouche, and then it was on to the point where Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr saved the franchise. And look at the history of the Pirates there. I mean, Bill
Right.
Mazeroski, the shot heard around the world, knocking out the Yankees, and then the Steelers with the, you can count them on your finger how many coaches they've had in their existence. So it's a reputable city, and it's a hardworking, a lunch pail mentality, just like Detroit is, and it's a Rust Belt. What can you say?
Well,
That's true.
I think one of the ideas I came with, thanks to my wife Candy, and then I'm going to make this announcement while I have an opportunity, George, before I put you in here, is we're going to be creating a show called the Fire Up Series, which will allow us to have a lot of different markets in place, so we don't put them up and they'll be under one umbrella. That will not affect Fire Up Wisconsin, Fire Up Michigan, or Florida. They'll remain separate entities. Everything's done. I want to give everybody an opportunity around the country, whether it's sports or non-sports related content, to come up on the Fire Up Series. Look for announcements on there. So Candy came up with the idea. Once she explained it to me, said there's no way, this is a no-brainer. So we'll release more details. All right, George, give me your insights about the Pittsburgh sports scene. And
I had a good friend of mine, Frank Greco, of course, and I met him at IBM when I worked for Big Blue. And Frank works for Chatham University. Have you heard of that, Madman?
Yeah, I've heard of
Chatham
that.
College.
Yep.
And Frank has always been a huge Penguins fan, and of course Steelers fan and Pirates fan. And you're right. You look over the history, and it's very similar to Detroit, although not in football. But Detroit had a football dynasty back in the 50s, as we know. But oh my God, the Steel Curtain and Terry Bradshaw, and like you said, Chuck Noll and Mean Joe Green, and I mean, just a fabulous. And then of course, We Are Family, the Pittsburgh Pirates with Willie Stargell and company. And of course, the Red Wings hated to play Pittsburgh. We won the one Stanley Cup. Then you guys came back and got revenge. So, but no, Scott, you were right on talking to a guy from Pittsburgh, because it is a great sports town, and it always has been. Yes.
Well, let me explain this to all you folks out there that are watching and listening, and I'll go over some of the things in a moment. But Dale Eller, okay, talks about going into Forbes Field. He brings up a lot of things, and and I don't want to give everything away. I want you to watch it, because this guy Dale Eller is the most credible person on the planet. He's there with his wife, and he's got a bucket list of things that he wants to do. But the knowledge that you gain watching Dale Eller talk on the Sports Exchange, to me, and it's already out there on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. If you're a Pittsburgh sports fan or just a general sports fan, Dale Eller knows his stuff. And to me, he's just an unbelievable guest that, by the way, just happened to be in the right place at the right time when we were at Doubleday Field. So you never know where you're going to find your next guest and what you're going to have in common. You get to know them. Boom. Like you said, Mark, okay, you have a smartphone and you fire up the recording, you release it whenever you're ready to release it. And that just so happens that timing, luck, and rapport had a lot to do with what how the Sports Exchange took place with Pittsburgh sports scene. So to me, I hit home runs with the Canadian Fan, Mark Meredith, and Dale Eller. They were all three incredible shows. But the best part about those particular shows is they were live. They were interviews at a particular site. So that's what made it so much fun. Hey, I got a great show here, and I'm out here at Baseball Hall of Fame, or wherever you were to go. You can always find your next guest somewhere if you're able to think on your feet enough. And it just so happens in this particular case with Meredith, Eller, and the young Canadian kid, it just turned out unbelievable. So Dale Eller, if you're out there watching, listening, I'm looking forward to bringing you on. And maybe you never know, he could be on down the road. But I got his contact information, so there's no question that I'll be in touch with him. But meanwhile, what a great first act to be able to do shows with the kid Mark Maridai, and Dale Eller. They were just thrilled to do it. So now that I've talked about the three main ones that are out there, okay, now it's time to preview a couple that you're probably going to see by the end of the week. I actually wore a Detroit Tigers shirt at Yankee Stadium. I did 2 videos that'll be released, as I mentioned, this week. Why would I do something like that? Good question. Am I insane? No, we're past that point already. After being in this business 40 years, insane was being nice to me. Okay, but one of the videos was filmed over at the site of the old Yankee Stadium, which now has diamonds for the kids to play on. It's unbelievable. My wife Candy and I took some selfies over there so she can feel like and tell her friends I was actually on the site of the original Yankee Stadium. So that's something she'll never forget. And of course, I paid a game over there to see it. But this was a brilliant move by the Bronx to do this. And, you know, when you talk about the outside Yankee Stadium, I go out there and talk about the legends that have played there. You know, I had an opportunity to think that, you know, one of our first videos that'll be coming up will be the original class of 1936 that ended up featuring Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth in that 1936 class. And I think what was so cool about it is, you know, people don't realize that the Tigers and the Yankees have a very rich history together. I also covered the Fort Lauderdale Yankees and New York Yankees during spring training when they were at Fort Lauderdale. And of course, the Tigers, I've been covering them for a lot of years. And then we proceeded to do another video actually outside the new Yankee Stadium. So we were connecting the dots. Again, folks, the key is connecting the dots, okay? Did a shorter video outside the newer Yankee Stadium. Built, looks like a brand beautiful stadium. Of course, I don't know about the bells and whistles because I was on the outside. And then, of course, reminiscing about the old one. And I was joking around. It may not come across that way in the video that David Price actually played for the Yankees. Yeah, I'll bet they wish he did. But he was, in retrospect, playing for the Tampa Bay Rays when I went out there. So it's immaterial. But I joked around about it because who in their right mind at that time wouldn't want David Price on their team anyhow? And the Tigers subsequently landed him. So with that said, I'll go with you, Mancini. What are your thoughts about those 2 particular videos out at Yankee Stadium, the new one and the old one?
Well, did you wear a bulletproof vest? That's a tough area, the Bronx, man. I've been there.
Yeah, no.
I've seen a game in the old Yankee Stadium when George Brett was flirting with 400. But yeah, I haven't been in the new stadium, but yeah, that's rich in tradition there, Yankee Stadium. I'd be looking around if I'm wearing a Tiger shirt in that area.
Well, I've been known to be bold a little bit. Luckily, though, the thing that worked to my advantage out there when I did it is the Yankees are playing in Boston with the Red Sox.
Yeah.
And that had helped a little bit. Candy's friends and 2 of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Candy worked with a person named Lauren Aranio and her son and her husband, Joe Aranio. To me is unbelievable. This guy knows the streets like anybody else. So I felt with Joe as my brother from another mother, okay, I didn't need a bulletproof vest because I know Joe had my back. And you know, I'm looking forward to going up there more often to see the Aranios. They're unbelievable. I mean, to me, Lauren Aranio is the nicest person I've ever seen. You talk about an absolute sweetheart. Oh, she gets it. And Joe is a street-wise character that when we were driving, see, what we initially did when we went to New York City is we ended up taking a tour from the guy that I mentioned earlier in the show, and he did a heck of a job. And then we went back the next day, and Lauren and Joe took us around, and it was cool. You know, and, you know, it was so fun as Candy and Lauren were in the backseat and Joe and I were in the front shooting the breeze. That was a blast. So, Mark, I guess to answer your question, I've been to the Bronx, okay, during a game. You're right. It's probably not an area that's overly that safe, although if it's protected, it's okay. But no, I didn't need a bulletproof vest because I was smart enough to go when there wasn't a game. And yet we took some pictures of the outside. So, yeah, I'm with you, Mark, all the way. No, it wasn't necessary that particular day. But it was neat, though. We were able to put 2 videos together of the old and the new. And as a result, you know, a lot of people can relate from generation to generation. And you want to talk about some rough neighborhoods, don't tell me the Dodger Stadium's a good one. And George and I can relate that Tiger Stadium wasn't much better either. So, George, before we go to those references, what are your thoughts about the Yankee Stadium, old and new?
Well, you know, I'm a bit jealous because I haven't been to any game at Yankee Stadium in my lifetime. So I really would like to do that. Obviously, it's on my bucket list. So I think it's great. And I also think it's wonderful that they're using the fields, like you said, for young kids, sandlot players, little leaguers, whatever, right in the shadow of the new Yankee Stadium. So that's a wonderful thing. I urge the commissioner, he's got to get that All-Star game back in New York, and he's got to give it to the Yankees because, they played it in the last year at the old Yankee Stadium, but come on, that's been a long while now. And they got to give that All-Star game back in New York City where it belongs, but that's another day, another subject. But no, Scott, I think that's a great set of interviews that you did, because really a lot of people like myself are, have it on their bucket list to go there someday. They haven't been able to see the house that Ruth built, the house that Mano built, and now the house that the new time Yankees, the Judge, here comes the Judge, man, shooting down home runs like crazy there at Yankee Stadium. Well, I think it's great. Oh, that's great to do interviews right there on the spot.
Yeah,
And,
we didn't. Yeah,
good-
we didn't do
good
any
work.
we didn't do any interviews on the spot in the Bronx. Okay, I didn't need to. First of all, there wasn't anybody there that I was able to talk to. Anyhow, I just wanted to focus on shorter videos. But
Yeah, the
they often
features.
refer to the new stadium as the house that George Steinbrenner built.
Yeah,
And a lot of what you have there, actually, now that you think about what he did in the Bronx, he duplicated it to a large extent over in Tampa as George M. Steinbrenner Field, where they train in Tampa. And of course, the Yankees have their setup there, and the Steinbrenners lived in the Tampa area. So the correlation between the new Yankee Stadium and George M. Steinbrenner Field in Tampa is just truly amazing. So, I know the one thing, folks, as you watch this show, we did 3 live interviews there, but it was so much fun doing a lot of short reference videos of the specific places that we ended up going into, because you get a little bit of an atmosphere about where to go, and it kind of strikes your bucket list a little. And you don't know when you're going on a trip what types of stuff's going to fall your lap. But boy, the only thing I can honestly say is, thankfully, I have a smartphone out there, and then I can just pick and choose whenever I want to do something. If it makes sense, you do it. And there's nothing better than being able to do something spontaneous without any preparation, because it's really, in my mind, unbelievable. Because it's anybody can do anything scripted, but if you can do it on site, and I'm not saying I'm great at it, or I'm not, so I don't want to apply that, but if you can do something on the spot, think on your feet, it comes out natural. You don't worry about a mistake or two here and there. I'm not in the business, folks, on a lot of my shows that I'm going to sit there and be an editing freak. Okay, I'm a firm believer that if it comes out natural, it comes out. We're all human. Okay, you can't take out the human element. Certainly you try to make sure you joke around and minimize your references. But when you look at some of the whole, some of the part, nowadays people like to have show formats. They like to look at shorter videos. Pick your genre and what you got to do. And our whole idea that we're trying to do here on South Florida Tribune YouTube channel is mix sports with non-sports related things. So we appeal to everybody. And when the opportunity comes to go to New York and New York State, to me, New York State from a standpoint, Cooperstown, and New York City, the Big Apple, to me, it was a no-brainer. And it could not have worked out any better as it did. So, what can I tell you? I know that we've touched around, and over the next few weeks, we're going to be uncovering more and more videos on a lot of their different shows here on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. So please go out there if you haven't subscribed. I want to go over 1 or 2 more things before we call it overnight. If you didn't hear me earlier, okay, I want you folks to please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel by going to youtube.com, and then go out there and hit the subscribe button when you find it. It's a palm tree out there, and then click on subscribe. Or you can visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, all in all, New York was, in my opinion, upstate New York, Big Apple was a smashing success. And of course, don't forget what we talked about earlier. Al Avila was the headliner of the week in Metro Detroit, because it was a matter of if, it was a matter of when. When you frustrate the fans and the media and you start feeling it in the pocketbook, it's inevitable that you don't wish anybody unemployment, but the results speak for themselves, and it's a move the Tigers had to make. And in the coming weeks, we'll have a much better idea who the potential candidates will emerge. So with that said, okay, I'm going to let Mark Mancini go ahead and let everybody know where they get a hold of him. I'll mention my stuff real quickly, and we'll call it a night. Look forward to next Monday's edition of Fire Up Michigan. So, all right, Mark, any closing thoughts, though, Mark, before we get to your...
No, I think you covered it pretty good. And my favorite Yankee of all time was Bobby Mercer.
All right, well, not a bad. And, I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because one of the things I mentioned in the old Yankee Stadium was I made references to Lou Gehrig, and I think that was really neat. And you talk about Babe Ruth, the farewell speech. You talk about nostalgic. I mean, how many farewell speeches? In fact, I'll even go online and tell you, for you Yankee fans that are tuning in, I actually bought a nice photo that I'll be hanging up here about Gehrig with that, or rather Babe Ruth bowing to the crowd or whatever, and that signature shot that'll be on my wall here. And I've got a lot of Lou Gehrig paraphernalia too that I have, and some videos there. So I mean, the Yankees have undoubtedly, win 27 championships because you're not there to get them. So, what can I say? Yeah, Bobby Mercer was a pretty good player too. So, all right. With that said, Mark, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
XM 203, Sirius 217, Sports Byline on Fridays, WWDB AM 860 Talk of Philadelphia, Liberty Bell Smack with Mary Ann and Sal on Thursdays, Pittsburgh Pirates Podcast, first base coach Derek Brock, Mondays and Friday mornings, and a host of other shows, producing and everything. Just so blessed to do the Oakland one. And you and Don, I think he's a long lost brother of Don Kessinger, Bruce Kessinger there.
Right.
But George and us and all of us across this airwaves, man, is just so I'm blessed. And your lovely wife orchestrating it with the silver one there. It's amazing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing the show with you and Bruce Kessinger. You come up with some unbelievable guests, and Bruce is a real super nice guy. I always enjoy working with you, Mark. I mean, you're probably the best addition to my life in 2022, and I know we have a lot of big plans ahead of us in future weeks. So, all the people you've connected with me with have been first class. They have. I have no complaints about any of them, but I really do particularly look forward to going on the shows with Bruce Kessinger, because I think Bruce and I have built something there, and it's really neat. So, and I know you and I have plans for other things as well that we'll divulge at a later date. So, all right, George, give everybody a brief way that they get a hold of you. I know you promoted your book early, so why don't you hand out the rest of the information?
Yeah, get a hold of me at SNG Sports 99 that you see on your screen there. Also available on Facebook, G. Eichhorn at Yahoo, and also on LinkedIn. So, looking forward to talking more sports on Fire Up Michigan and the shows that populate these popular airwaves. It's a great show. Good being with you guys tonight, as usual.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, George Eichhorn's involved with the Sports Exchange, and he comes through wherever we need him. We call him our most valuable player because he's very versatile. I'll go over my stuff one more time. Subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel at youtube.com and look for it there. Otherwise, visit www.southfloridatribune.com or follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. Advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Also want one last quick shout out to Ron Kroll. We appreciated all your timely comments in the chat room, and just give everybody food for thought. Okay. If you ever have any comments in the chat room, we will mention your name and read those comments verbatim as you type them in there, because this is not my show, Mark's show, George's show. It's a people's show. And one other kudos out there, I want to thank Candy Ebling, who does a remarkable job putting it all together, both on the broadcast side as well as posting the content. Without her, this would be an impossible task to do it, because I'm definitely not technically smart enough to do it. And she comes up with a lot of things as well. A little preview for the rest of the week here. What I have going on now is we'll have 108 Stitches baseball talk tomorrow night. I will be going out there to the Miami Marlins and the San Diego Padres on Wednesday. And, of course, we have Sports Talk Saturday with Bruce Kessinger. On Saturday, I will announce the guests later on once they're completely confirmed. And there'll be other announcements made along the line. So I think one of the big announcements I want to mention before we call it a night is look for the Fire Up series, which will allow every part of the country to get involved. And I'm looking forward to casting that wide net so we can go out there and hit everybody, sports, non-related stuff. So meanwhile, what a fine show tonight. I always look forward to coming on here with Madman Mancini, George Eichhorn. What else can I say about you? Otherwise, I got two of the best co-hosts on the planet. Me. All I am is All I am is a guy that does the best I can to put it together and do we got to do to keep it interesting for all. So, meanwhile, on behalf of Madman Mancini, George Icord, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Fire Up Michigan, and we will catch you the next time. Have a great week, everybody. See you next Monday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice.